Hey, everybody. Welcome to Daniel Davis Deep Dive, coming to you live from Washington, D.C. I'm sorry we don't have Tony Shaffer with us at the moment. We have some technical difficulties, which we are feverishly trying to fix behind the scenes. Hopefully, he'll be joining us very soon. But we're going to go ahead and get started here because I know a lot of you have been waiting online for us. We're very grateful for that. Folks, we got a problem, and we just got to be honest about this. American leadership is causing more trouble for us than it is solving problems. And this has been going on for quite a while. So many times we always hear that, American leadership in the world is what's most needed. And we've got to, always be out there out front and showing, that we have the resolve to get, whatever the problem of the day is resolved. And yet, when you look at the actual production, the things that are actually done, the accomplishments, the results of these so-called actions of leadership are having an unambiguous negative impact on our country, our well-being, our economic potential, and our national security, most of all. And these things are all intricately interwoven, and they have to be done well. You have to have good strategic thoughts. You have to have wise, intelligent leadership. You have to be able to understand the world as it is. You have to have a vision for where you want to go. You have to say, all right, here are the fundamentals that are involved. Here are the human elements. Here are the physical things, the production capacity, the ability of this player or that player, and our ability to counter. You put all that together and you say, all right, what's possible? What outcome would help America the most? And if we accomplished this, or if we prevented that, we would be benefited. And then what is the realistic possibility of that? And what you should always try to do is push the envelope a little bit. If it's hard to do this part here, but it would be beneficial, then let's try to go just a little bit beyond that. But let's, there's no guarantees that you're going to succeed in all these things, but you want to have a plan that combines the most realistic probabilities based on fundamentals, based on existing realities, and trying to get the best outcome for your side. If you don't succeed all the time, that's human nature, because, there's other players. It's a dynamic situation. Other people are involved. They've got their own interest. So, you're never going to get things completely the way you want. It's always, going to be a messy thing when human affairs or human people get involved. That's all true. That's all understandable. Nobody expects American leaders, military, political, to get everything right, to be perfect. We would like it to be the case, but we understand it's not. That's not a problem if you're not perfect. What is a problem, however, is if you take things that exist and you say, well, this is what I would like to have happen, and then you actually pursue that, even though the fundamentals don't support it. It's one thing to try to push the envelope a little bit to get something for your outcome, your benefit, and something different to say, hey, we're going to try and basically defy gravity to get something that we want just because we want it, even though the situation there doesn't support that. That is where we are today. Now, I'm going to start off, and we're going to talk about the issues at hand today, especially the Russia-Ukraine war, the Israeli-Hamas war, and our involvement in that, how it works out, and why there's trouble. But to kind of get a running start, we'll go back to 2021, to the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Now, I could go a lot further back because, unfortunately, this is not a new phenomenon. If you've been watching our show for any amount of time or reading the things I've been writing for the last couple of decades, you'll see that there has been a lot of problems. And it doesn't matter R or D. A lot of these problems keep coming in, and our leadership keeps making big mistakes here. And so we don't have the hours it would take to go all the way back. But let's start in August of 2021, when the Biden administration withdrew the U.S. forces from Afghanistan. Now, I'm not one of those that says, oh, it was a disaster and we should never have done it, and it was done terrible and all this, because it was the right thing to do to withdraw from Afghanistan. I was arguing as far back as 2009 that if we didn't make some significant changes, that we were going to lose that war. And all the years after that, all the way up until then, I continued to argue this all throughout the Trump administration that the United States needed to withdraw from Afghanistan, because that's what would be the most beneficial to our country. It was a losing proposition. The fundamentals clearly said we're not going to win this war, so we need to do something to change it, and we need to withdraw from it to cut off the bleeding wounds and move on to something else. Trump for all of the things that he may not have done well, he did say, we're going to get out of this war. We're going to leave during his administration in May of 2021. When Biden came in there, instead of sticking with the plan, instead of operating that, he delayed his decisions, basically kind of ignored it until almost May, and then decided that he was going to get out in August of that year. And it turned out to be a complete disaster. And the way that it was done was so avoidable. There's a bunch of things that could have been done differently, but we didn't. And instead, we had the disaster that we've all seen, with the jets running down the runway, with people trying to fall off of it. The fact that the Taliban rolled in before we could even get out. I mean, it was about as disastrous as it could be. And a lot of that was avoidable. It could have been done in order, on time, and we would have left even a functioning government and military that would have at least had a shot at continuing to be a viable government. But instead, all that was disaster. Now then, we fast forward to today. And let me pause here for a minute. Gary, do we have Tony? Do I see? He's not there. Okay. Well, all right. We're continuing to work on that, and we'll come back when we get a shot. But let's go into where we are today, because now then I want to show you what we're doing right now should be a red flag to us, and something that we're going to have to fix, and we're going to have to look into what's going to take care of it. Now, first of all, we want to look at what White House spokesman John Kirby said recently regarding our involvement with the Russia-Ukraine war.
We all want to see this war end, but it's got to end on terms that President Zelensky and the Ukrainian people can accept. We want to help them succeed on the battlefield, so that if and when President Zelensky, and only President Zelensky, can determine when it's time to sit down with President Putin.
Okay. We have our interest in the war between Russia and Ukraine. And as you know, my position has been that this is an unwinnable war. The fundamentals are clearly conveying that this can't be won by Ukraine. And for us to continue to ignore that is just not wise course of action, because you're trying to attain the unattainable. It's not going to work. But then you see that even the White House, and its messaging, Kirby just says, only President Zelensky is going to call this, as though we're just kind of an innocent bystander. We are providing a tremendous amount, the lion's share amount of all the things that Ukraine has used in its war. And to now then say that we're just going to sit on the sidelines and let Zelensky call the shots is not leadership, because we're letting the guy who's on the ground, who can't make a decision that is not in his national interest. He's the one that's been invaded. So we can't expect him to look at the situation and say, well, we don't have the capacity to continue to fight here, so let me make a negotiated settlement. That's what, if you're talking about leadership, that's what we're for. We're the ones that need to say, hey, we're for you. We're on your side. We want you to remain a free and viable political entity, and to keep your country as much as you can free into the future. But you're not going to win this war. So instead of continuing to shovel in money and weapons and ammunition into a losing cause, let's go in a different direction. Let's seek a negotiated settlement. Let's seek an armistice. Let's try to bring this to a halt. Let's go to a ceasefire, something to save his people and to do something that has a chance. That would be leadership. But instead, we just keep saying, hey, whatever you want, and you get to call the shots. Now we're in a situation, and again, you talk about the undermining of American leadership. You have the situation now to where we keep saying, the White House keeps saying, yes, we're going to help you, but now the Congress isn't playing along, because the Congress isn't following his lead, and of course, people around the country are not either. Now, I think we may have Tony Shaffer on the line. Do I see that correct, Gary? We do. There, we finally got it solved.
Finally.
Good to see you.
Three times to get in. So yeah, good morning. Good to see you, Dan.
Good morning. Yeah, glad to see you. We got a running start here for you, so we got the tracks greased for you.
Sure.
But want to bring you in, because I know this is an issue that you track a lot of times, is the diminishing influence and ability to lead of America's senior leaders, and this goes back a long way. But we're specifically talking right now about the loss of influence, even, that the White House has right now. And at this point, we're talking about the Russia-Ukraine war. So Biden has been going in directions that are just not sustainable, that not providing much leadership. But now then, even at home, He can't convince the Congress to give this money. He brought Zelensky in to try to close the deal. That didn't work. Now then, they're losing on the battlefield. Ukraine is. They're not getting any money, and I don't know that that money is going to come out here. But the bigger issue is we don't seem to have a vision for what we even want to accomplish.
Right. So let's start with the vision first. So back when the Trump administration rolled into town back in 2016, a small group called Team B was advising the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Joe Dunford. That team included, amongst others, Ambassador Hank Cooper, who ran as the Strategic Defense Initiative under President Reagan, Bud McFarlane, National Security Advisor to President Reagan, Lieutenant General Dick Newton, former Assistant Chief of Staff of the Air Force, Mike Flynn for part of it. Mike was off the team once he became part of the Trump campaign, and Jim Woolsey, my friend Jim, former Director of CIA. And one of our core recommendations, and Navy Captain Pete O'Brien was our recorder, and God bless you, Pete. Pete's out there, probably going to hear this. One of the recommendations that I can safely say without giving away anything confidential we may have discussed, which was the recommendation for essentially a national strategy. One of the things we recognized, looking at everything, this team, we all recognized it, that we don't have what we would call a grand strategy. How does everything work together globally? And this includes everything from commerce to culture, everything in between. And I would argue, Danny, we did something like this, and it was called the Rainbow Plans in the interwar years between World War I and World War II. The Rainbow Plans, for those who don't understand, was essentially a grand strategy which examined all threats, all sources of threats, and planned against them. One of the most infamous of the Rainbow Plans, I've talked about both in person and on the air, is Plan Orange. Yes. Plan Orange was essentially the strategy for defeating Japan. And they did. They largely, the Navy, not the Army. MacArthur was doing his own thing, just for saying. But the Navy and Halsey and Nimitz all implemented essentially a version of Plan Orange to do that. So that thinking between the wars helped inform FDR and the political establishment of what was necessary to ramp up. Remember, we got a running start for World War II. We kind of knew what was coming, for better or for worse. I don't want to get into conspiracies here. Yeah. I'm saying that the United States military had a good sense that war was coming on both. We were the arsenal of democracy, yada, yada, yada. So I'm just saying that one of the things we've recognized, just looking at the past and what was successful, the lack of a grand strategy. Having, and Sun Tzu said this, tactics without strategy is a noise before defeat. And boy, oh boy, do we have tactics, do we have
very well said
technology, but we have no idea what to do with it. And I think that's what you were trying to say. And walking up to the issues regarding Ukraine, it's like, oh yeah, let's throw some cash in there. Let's fund the Kiev puppet theater and pay for their civil service. That'll help. Okay, yeah. And the other thing to say here, the one of the lessons I learned, and we'll talk about Afghanistan in a minute, Operation Dark Heart. Last chapter was the path to victory. They didn't take that path, Danny, just saying. So regarding this, when DOD went after the book to show me, we're going to show you, by gosh, how much we hate you, it had the opposite effect. It made it into a bestseller that everybody wanted to see. That's what they did with Russia. We're going to get you, Putin. Oh, we're going to be really mean. And when they did that, it's like, okay, you're just going to basically increase the price of oil, which benefits them, which they did. He's going to look for other markets because we're going to cut off. Germany can't have your gas. Yeah. Okay, China wants it. Okay, there he's benefiting another enemy, China. So I'm just saying, Danny, if you just look at the basic block and tackling or lack thereof of this administration, everything they do has the opposite effect of what they say they're trying to achieve.
If they're actually trying to achieve anything, and it's unclear what that is, other than harming Russia, which I don't even know what that means either. Next thing we want to look at, Tony, here is the leadership from the top here, and there's a couple of things I want to point out here. I'm going to show you a couple of clips of Biden, and then one result of it, and we'll get you on the other side of that. First of all, let's take a look at Biden in a recent press conference.
Well, I have had conversations with Bibi Netanyahu, and I want to make sure that we don't forget what we're doing here. We have to support Israel because they're an independent nation. With regard to the flooding of the tunnels, there is assertions being made that there's quite sure there are no hostages in any of these tunnels, but I don't know that for a fact. I do know that, though, every civilian death is an absolute tragedy, and Israel stated its intent, as I said, to match its words with its intent with actions. That's what I was talking about today.
Now, I don't want to get into just bashing Joe Biden, but I mean, we just got to be honest and say you see that this is a really low energy thing. The stream of thought seems kind of to be weaving around kind of on its own, and it's not really striking anywhere, especially when you compare that with Bibi Netanyahu is for good or ill, no matter what anybody thinks about him, he is a force and he carries a lot of gravitas in his comments. But now then we see when Biden actually gets into some kind of a policy and something that he wants that strong individual to do, this is what happens.
I made it clear to the Israelis that to Bibi and to his war cabinet that I think the only ultimate answer here is a two-state solution that's real.
And he has insisted, but here's what Israel has to say about his insisting.
Is there still a chance for a two-state solution?
I think it's about time for the world to realize the Oslo paradigm failed on the 7th of October, and we need to build a new one. And in order to build a new one...
Does that new one include the Palestinians living in a state of their own? Is that what it includes?
I think the biggest question is what type of Palestinians are on the other side. This is what Israel realized
do they
on
have
7th
a state,
of October.
though?
The answer is absolutely no, and I'll tell you why.
Well, then
because
how can
at
there
the
be
moment,
peace?
no,
How can there be
answer
peace
to you.
in
The reason there is no peace
Israel
is because the
How
Palestinians...
can, without offering
Mark,
a state to Palestine, how can there be peace in Israel?
So you have the president of the United States emphatically saying, and he has said this many times, a two-state solution. A two-state solution is what we're going to do. Israel unequivocally says, absolutely not. No two-state solution, not even moving. Then you don't hear anything else from the United States. You don't hear any kind of saying, well, if that's your position, then good luck to you. You're on your own. Nothing. It's just like, however much money you need, let me know. We're going to write a check. We're going to do whatever. But the biggest issue and the thing that I want to keep pointing back to is that it shows that our influence and our ability to lead is just almost non-existent right now.
It is. So let me break it down. And I'm going to say some things your audience and our mutual friends are going to like. Oslo II failed. She basically said that. Oslo II was the opportunity for the Palestinians to have a two-state solution. It was signed on the White House lawn with, I believe, President Clinton and the Israelis and PLO. I think Yasser Arafat was there, for goodness sake. That was the grand experiment. It's like, there you go. We're not going to call it two states, but you're on your own. And I think the premise was, Danny, if the Palestinians can, in good faith, establish a functioning government with control of their own spaces, you're going to have a two-state solution. They didn't want that. The Palestinians, did not want that. Now, the PLO was eclipsed by Hamas, and I don't want to go into all the detail history. We could talk about that, you and I, for an hour, just going through the history. What I want to get to for the purposes of this discussion and Joe Biden is what the Biden folks are trying to offer has been tried, and they have not offered any other solution. It's like, oh, we want a two-state solution. It's like, dude, that horse is literally beat to death. Literally, it died on the 7th of October. Accept it. So instead of engaging and trying to show leadership, which I think is your point, they're just basically regurgitating old talking points. Like, yeah, dude, it's not going to work this time. You've got to come up with something different. And instead of leading and trying to say, well, we understand the issues for both sides, and we understand the Israelis aren't going back to Oslo because of 7 October, and we understand the Palestinian people are suffering. We need to figure out a new path. Instead of showing leadership, it's like, yeah, we want to go back and like a dog going to lick up its vomit. That's what they're trying to do.
That's exactly right. In fact, just before you came on, I had shown the exact same dynamic where we see that the Ukraine war is just unwinnable by any metric. Anything you want to do is to announce it. But instead of acknowledging that, we still keep the fiction of going, okay, yeah, as long as it takes, as long as it takes. And so we're not willing to recognize the reality. We're trying to attain the unattainable, and it's failing.
And that's the point. It's like so many politicians, and I work with a lot of members of the media that you and I both know. One of the common threads and themes that my colleagues in the media, and technically, I guess I'm a media guy too now. I don't believe I'm one, but I technically may be one.
Yeah, I think you are.
Is that we all recognize that there needs to be a clear separation from political aspiration to ground truth. Now, the ground truth is exactly what you and I just said. Oslo II is dead. I don't care how you feel about Palestine and Israel. It's dead. It's not going to happen. So you got to take that and accept it as a premise going into whatever you do. Ukraine, the same thing. For God's sake, right now, Danny, the Duma, the Russian Duma is talking about terms of surrender. What will they be willing to accept regarding terms of surrender by Ukraine? And the West is all pretending, oh, everything's fine. We're just going to continue to throw money at it. This is insane. And the fact is, regarding leadership, and I'm not pro-Putin, but I'm going to get in trouble for this. Putin just did a 4-hour annual talk to his people to include taking, I think, an hour and a half, 2 hours of questions from the media.
Yeah.
So what are we to make of this? What is the truth? Is it in our interest as the American public to pretend that the Russians aren't winning, that Putin's now measuring the drapes in Odessa, like, hey, I'm going to have an office there, and I want these to be, a combination of kind of a chartreuse with a little bit of black. I mean, that's where the Russians are going. And by the way, they're backed up by the momentum of their countering the Ukrainian offensive. That's the ground truth. So the fact is that the American media and British media ignores what we're talking about, ignores what's being said in Russia, ignores the fact that Putin has prevailed and is getting ready to implement whatever offensive he cares to implement, is a complete departure from the aspirational thinking and propaganda of the Western media informed by the political leadership. It's insane. It's literally, there's no circling that square.
There's just not yet. We're going to now. We saw what happened when we were unwilling to acknowledge reality for 20 years in Afghanistan, and then when in reality finally imposed itself on us and no more spin would work, we saw how disastrous that was. But this situation, you get this one wrong. I mean, imagine how are we going to square this one? You talk about a round peg in a square hole. How are we going to square this one if no matter what we've been saying and all the things we've been trying to accomplish, all of a sudden Putin actually does make it in there and the Ukrainian military does collapse? What are we going to say then? How are we going to spin that one?
Well, I don't think we can. I mean, this is where you point out rightly that you were a whistleblower, and God bless you. And I always bring this up, and I think we need to do a separate show just on whistleblowers at some point. And they basically kept telling people, I knew it was true. That's why I had no problem supporting you, not knowing you. It's like, no, I'm sure Danny's telling the truth. I know what's going on. The complete another departure from a factual context of reality by the politicians and American media will result in catastrophic events and failure, period. It doesn't matter where you are, if you're left or right, if you support the D's on Capitol Hill or the R's, it doesn't matter. Facts could care less about your feelings. They just don't care.
I love that.
So
phrase.
the facts are going to jump up and bite both parties in their proverbial ass. And I'm not talking about the ass shown in the Senate chambers, just saying, I don't want to go down that path. So, the D's do put the D in democracy, don't they? Just saying. Not that I want to go down and talk about that in a great degree.
I'm glad you don't.
But I'm just saying that they're going to get bit in the ass, both sides, because everybody continues to facilitate this idea that Zelensky's actually winning the war, and just a little more money is going to result in some positive outcome. It's not. And it's just time that people recognize that.
But now let's shift gears a little bit, Tony, because there's another issue that I think we're on the front side of finding some problems with, and I want to see how you think this is going to play out. But let me show you a little bit about what Secretary of Defense Austin is talking about, a growing problem in the Red Sea.
Yeah.
Regarding the Houthis, these attacks are reckless, dangerous, and they violate international law. And so we're taking action to build an international coalition to address this threat. And I would remind you that this is not just a U.S. issue. This is an international problem, and it deserves an international response. We're going to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to ensure freedom of navigation in the area. The straits are pretty important, as you know. A large amount of commerce flows through there. International commerce flows through there on a daily basis.
Okay, so just sticking with our current
Yeah.
theme of leadership and our lack of influence, I'm just being honest. If I'm a Houthi rebel or if I'm an Iran-backed violent extremist in the region and I see that, I'm laughing because I'm like saying, you're going to try. I mean, it's low energy, it's rambling. There's no certainty. Nothing's going to make me quake in my boots. And so I'm going to keep doing whatever I want to do. If that is the way they're viewing it as well, and so far it has been, what is going to happen when one of these missiles ends up, actually hitting one of these ships and maybe burning it down or sinking it or something like that, or the thing escalates beyond the current realm, and now we have to start firing into that, and then you have the issue, of course, up in Syria and Iraq we've talked about with our troops just basically waiting to be killed by one of these things, and then the possibilities for escalation on that. How do we handle this, and what could American leadership be doing right now?
So I appreciate the way you frame that. So first off, Austin should have said, Secretary Austin, 12% of global commerce moves through this area we're talking about in the Red Sea. 12%. That's a big percentage. One of the big oil producers and movers is BP. BP has said, we're out. We're not going to go through this route. It's too risky. So that right there is going to have an impact. And Danny, to your point, yeah, it's eventually going to have an impact on global commerce because 12% is 12%. You reduce that 12% and you have to put it other places. It increases cost, it increases inefficiency to the product. It's going to make things more difficult. And look, the global economy is already not all that stable. So this will have a destabilization effect. Iran knows this. Iran's doing this because there's no pushback. Now, I'm not saying we should go to war with Iran. I'm not saying that. Don't. I hope nobody comes away. Oh, Shaffer's proposing. He's a neocon. He wants to go to war. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we have to recognize, for better or for worse, we have a responsibility to the globe. Now, the way Austin does it is wrong. What Austin just said is the Pentagon equivalent of a strongly worded memo coming from a lawyer. It's like, really?
Right. That's exactly how I viewed it. Yeah, that's
like, okay. No, what we should say is. Right now, we are taking direct action to secure the lines of communication and commerce to prevent any loss of either side. It's not in anybody's interest to see this, and we go after them. Now, second, what I would also do at the same time is I would do a review of all the different little bases. Now, Danny, you and I have been out in fire bases. There's a great movie that talks about, in metaphor, what we're talking about called Restrepo. People need to go out and look at Restrepo because there was no good of having the fire base Restrepo. Right. None. Zero. Not a thing. You had people who didn't understand the local politics or culture trying to engage with a threat they didn't understand how to defeat in an area which they basically put themselves out there as targets. And what came of that? Nothing. Not a thing. Blood and treasure squandered in this fire base in the middle of nowhere in Afghanistan. We're doing the same thing here. We've got all these fire bases out there doing what
analogy.
We don't need them. You're just exposing Americans and contractors to fire unnecessarily. And so this goes back to the original premise. What are we doing? Why are we engaged in all these places? I'm not saying we shouldn't be there if there's a valid reason. I'm saying we should do 100% review. Is like, okay, why do you have that fire base? It's gotten
Absolutely.
5 rockets.
100% agree.
But at the same time, as you look at your force profile and reduce it to only what you need, you then look at effective use of that force profile to achieve objectives. So I think what Secretary Austin was trying to say, and if I were his staff, I would help him reframe his questioning. The United States is engaging in military operations to secure the lines of communication for all nations. We are going to engage on this effectively now. We're going to engage in operations to prevent any strikes on commerce from this moment on. And any attacks by the Houthi will be responded to in significant and overwhelming military force. Just do it. Don't talk about it. There's a great movie. One of my favorite movies. I'm an X-Files guy. There's a movie called Fight the Future. It was back in the 90s. And there's a scene in the movie where Agent Scully finds out there's a bomb in the building. It's like, Pick up the phone, get the people out of the building now. Don't talk, just do. That's what should be done here. Just do it. Knock them out.
And
And
Tony,
then
back to those bases in Iraq and Syria. Given the situation here now, I would like to have said, I was arguing on Fox in 2018 that we need to get rid of those and withdraw those troops from Syria because they do nothing for us. And every year I've been beating my head against that wall, and they didn't do it. Okay, we have what we have. Whether we should or shouldn't have is no longer debatable. We have them there. So the question is what to do now. Now I'm a bit torn because these so-called messages that the White House keeps saying we're sending with these strikes into Syria because of the strikes that have happened against our troops since October 17th.
Yeah.
To send a strong message, but they just laugh at us because they're little pinpricks here. So I'm torn between, on the one hand, I want to get the troops out of there, but on the second hand, if you're going to do something, I mean, if someone is shooting at American troops, I'm 100% for killing those guys. Point blank, no questions asked. As long as they're there, we got to protect them. Right. But these the little shots here, I think, are meaningless. I think these should go in overwhelmingly out of proportion for what has happened, or get them out, and maybe some combination of both. But I don't want to escalate either. But at some point, these little pinpricks are meaningless, if not negative, counterproductive.
We've had effective military leadership who understood how to win within the context of what they were given to do. So one of those guys is Joe Dunford. General Dunford, when he was chairman, led the by, with, and through strategy, which actually leveraged, Danny, mostly our allies and their troops. We basically were able to take back and get rid of ISIS in Iraq by eliminating, the forces, the ISIS forces, by using Iraq forces. It was brilliant. It kept us mostly out of the way. Did a series called Chain of Command. It's available. You guys can check it out. It actually goes through and talks about the methodology used effectively. And God bless Joe Dunford, fighting Joe Dunford. He recognized the need to leverage resources rather than use American forces as a lead. It worked. Another guy that I admire, and you probably, I don't know if you met him, is Stormin' Norman, General Schwarzkopf. Schwarzkopf.
Never met him though.
Oh, he was the graduation speaker at my class at the farm when we graduated from spy school. Yeah. So General Schwarzkopf defeated Iraq not only with military force, but through a series of really clever deception campaigns at the tactical, operational, and strategic level. Some of those are still classified, and they were utterly brilliant. I mean, I was just coming up and getting into the black operations world, and some of the guys who ran those were my instructors. And the sheer brilliance is like, oh my God, that's brilliant. And so we need to have a combination of sheer brilliance who understand the levers and mechanisms of strategic deception and how to buffalo an enemy, as well as having available and ready to use. If you need it, don't use it. Don't lead with it. Overwhelming military force. The idea of a blended option that the Pentagon can present to leaders is the best. It's always best. And the idea here often is Lindsey Graham, well, let's just go bomb them. I don't think that's the solution. And ultimately, bombing
that's not
without
a strategy either. That's just
and so, but that's the typical politician. Well, we just want to go bomb them. It's like, oh, it's not really the answer. But my point being, it's a long way of getting to answer your question. Yeah, there needs to be a reduction in our force structure regarding footprint. Why are we there? What are we doing? I was told by a very senior Pentagon leader that once we were in Syria, the Pentagon started looking for things to do. That's horrific.
Absolutely.
What?
Yeah, looking for jobs. Yeah, something to validate what they were there for. So they got to do something. But so let me ask you this. Let me shift gears a little bit, looking forward now. You were talking about Joe Dunford and Stormin' Norman. They're gone. They're out of the picture now. Do you see anybody on the even maybe in second and third levels down that could potentially provide that? And what can we do to reverse this situation? That's the real issue here. Is I just showed several clips of some of our senior leaders right now, and they seem to just be drifting left and right, trying to figure things out, but no strategic idea. How can we change that so we can get those kinds of leaders back in there again? Or do we just have to wait until this thing burns down and burns those guys down with them, and then we raise up new people? I hate to suggest it, but that's historically often how it does happen.
So I'll do a quote. One of my dear friends who died a few years ago was Jerry Doyle. Jerry Doyle played a character called Garibaldi on the series Babylon 5. And there was a Vorlon ambassador. Ambassador Koch, who was asked a very similar question by the main character played by Bruce Boxleitner. And the question was, is there anything we can do to stop the coming war, the coming collapse? And the answer was, the avalanche has started and it's too late for the pebbles to vote. So I think it's too late. I do. And I hate to see, but I think the leadership at DOD is so completely focused on skin color, who you sleep with. If you have a mental condition called transgenderism that you suffer from, they're going to give you all the drugs and care you need to continue to promote your mental condition. They're all focused on social issues. They've turned DOD, Danny, into what we used to call a social petri dish. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not a force that's designed to kill people and break things, and that's ultimately what it's supposed to do. Should it hold terrain and do some things to fix things? Yeah, I'm a civil affairs guy. I did my advanced course was civil affairs operations, and I got the T-shirt from Fort Bragg to show it. And it's a great field, and it's something that was very important to settle the war after. For example, civil affairs was hugely important after World War II. With that point said, I don't think any leadership would actually support the very fabric of our conversation. You and I would be discouraged from speaking our mind and talking about successful strategies and leaders in any given military institution of education at this point. I don't think they'd want to hear what we have to say.
Well, yeah, I think it's very clear that they don't, and that's really my frustration. And at least we want to put on shows like this to where we're exposed to the American people what's really going on, what's not going on, and there is a path to fix this. But
There is.
Tony, I kind of feel the same way as you do. I fear that's a good analogy. The avalanche has already started. You can't put that snow back up on the hill. And we may have to wait until we get burned down or covered over so that new people can arise and people will finally listen to people like what you're saying that makes sense.
Unfortunately, that's true. I mean, I'm always optimistic. I mean, look, you and I wouldn't still be standing after all these years and all the nonsense we went through. But with that said, there comes a point in time where you recognize the enemy is. I'm a big movie guy, so it's the scene in the Green Berets. It's like, the VC's in the wire, so I'm not sure if we can defend this fire base much longer. So,
yeah, and the back to at least there is some optimism here, and I bet you can echo the same thing. I've been around enough to know that there are some great Americans out there. There are some people who have some tremendous, brilliant thinking, great leadership capacity. But I think that the culture that we have created over the last couple of decades, it keeps them out of positions of power. When they start getting up too high, they get knocked down. But they're still there. So if we have an avalanche that knocks a bunch of stuff over, something gets burned down, we do have the capacity to rise up. I just wish there was some way we could do it without having to suffer loss first.
I do too, Danny. I just don't think it's in the cards. I really wish people would wake up. And again, this is not left or right. I have equal disdain for some of the folks on the Republican side because of their boneheaded, like, really? You propose that? And you and I, you've been in meetings with me. I get in trouble for speaking my mind at times with people who are politically minded. So I just don't care. It's like, I'm not here to be pleasant. Sorry. I'll be as pleasant as I can be. But my job is to deliver my assessment based on the facts, not aspirations. And that's the issue here. We have too many folks who have aspirations which do not reconcile themselves with the political reality and we face. So
that's exactly right. And that's the whole point here. And I think we'll leave it there for now because, man, we could just keep going on this for a long time. And already look forward to having you back on the next show because there's a lot more we got to unpack here. Keep joining Tony over at the Hard Truth podcast where you can get even more great stuff like he's been talking about here. And we will look forward to seeing you back the next time. Be sure to like and subscribe and share to others so that they get to enjoy this same level of information and entertainment, especially when we have Tony on like you've seen here. And we will see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.